The internet is full of scary photos that have been edited to elicit a reaction from visitors to some websites. But it also contains thousands of creepy photos that are either unexplained or have horrifying backstories attached to them. Whether they're creepy vintage photos or modern images that seemingly shouldn't exist. We rely heavily on our history books to learn more about the people who lived centuries ago. But thanks to new discoveries that are made by archaeologists every year, we've come to realize that there are gaps in our history that we never knew about. One such discovery has been made at sites close to the Nefud Desert in Saudi Arabia, and it's revealed that a previously unknown sect of desert nomads once lived in that region about 12,000 years ago. In 2025, researchers were at work at 4 different sites when they came across something remarkable. On some of the rocky outcrops in the area, they found about 130 life-sized rock carvings depicting animals that were living in the region at the time. 90 of those images depict wild camels that used to roam through the desert freely, suggesting that they were abundant at that time. The images also show wild horses, ibex, and an ancient type of cattle called aurochs. Aurochs are known to live in areas where there's a lot of water, and hence it's believed that this desert landscape was once very different. For these beasts to survive, the area would have needed a lot of rainfall, though it likely wasn't covered with greenery and grass to graze on. But it has, however, been established thanks to sediment analysis that 2 lakes used to exist in the area. These lakes would have attracted a wide array of animals, including birds, hunter-gatherers, and predators. This has changed the way archaeologists and historians look at northern Arabia, since it was always assumed that the region had always been arid and that humans would have found it impossible to survive there. We now know that at least one ancient tribe used to live in these deserts, not only thanks to the rock carvings that have been discovered, but also because of several different types of artifacts that have been unearthed. These include arrowheads, tools, and stone hearths that were used for cooking and warmth during the cold and desert nights. Some of these artifacts were found right next to the rock carvings and remained intact for thousands of years. It's further suggested that this tribe was nomadic, since the carvings of camels show them with thick coats that only appear during the winter months. Since rainfall used to fall in the winter time in this area, it's likely that the nomads followed these camels to this region and remained there for the cold months, since water was easily accessible at the 2 lakes. They likely remained in this area for a long time, since the carvings seem to improve over time, and some are carved over others. Other travelers may have used these carvings as directions to much-needed water, as it was discovered that when they're followed, they lead directly to a shortcut through the mountain and to a nearby lake. When the team arrived at this lake, they uncovered some stone hammering tools that had been left behind, and after the sediment in which they were found was analyzed, they were discovered to be about 12,000 years old, much other than any other tools, rock paintings, or carvings that have been found elsewhere in Arabia. Another strange aspect of this find is that many of the carvings were made high above the ground, and they would have been incredibly dangerous to create. A fall could have easily proven fatal, and while we know precious little about these ancient people, it is certain that they marked their water sources well, and with good reason. A creepy image of a page that looks as if someone scribbled incoherent ramblings in pencil onto it is one that has a truly disturbing and creepy backstory. The true story behind the vintage photo is far more disconcerting than meets the eye. On the 7th of February, 1909, a woman named Emma Hogg was diagnosed with schizophrenia. She was admitted to the University of Heidelberg Psychiatric Hospital in Germany, where she started receiving treatment for her condition. The treatment seemed to be working, and after a few months, she was discharged and sent home. But a few weeks later, her condition started to deteriorate once more, and she was readmitted. This time, treatment seemed to have little to no effect, and her condition was deemed terminal. She was sent to an asylum where she would spend the next 11 years before passing away. During her second stay at the hospital, she started writing letters to her husband and constantly talking about her family. The text in the letters overlaps in certain sections, giving the pages a strange appearance, with some of the letters so compactly written that they're impossible to read. One of the letters has the line "Sweetheart, come" written obsessively over and over. Another simply has the word "come" also repeated thousands of times, showing the longing that she had for her husband while she was being treated. Understandably, none of the letters were sent to her family, and they're being held in the Prinzhorn Collection of Art in Heidelberg. They were also featured in an exhibition called the Prinzhorn Collection: Traces Upon the Wonderblock, which was held at the Drawing Center in New York in 2000. In 2019, a theater company in Utah produced a play called Sweetheart Come, which is based on Emma's life and the letters that she wrote. 72-year-old David Lee Niles vanished on the evening of October 11, 2006. David, who had recently been battling cancer and depression, was last seen at Jake's Bar in Byron Center, Michigan. At some point during the evening, David abruptly left the bar without telling any of his friends where he was going. After that evening, David was never seen again. Friends immediately began to panic, as David wasn't doing too well at the time. Suffering from cancer and depression is enough to put anyone in a bad headspace. His disappearance was reported to police, though there were no sightings of David after he left the bar and no witnesses to come forward. Slowly, David's case turned cold, much to the dismay of friends and family. The prevailing theory was that David had taken his own life, and if that was the case, family and friends simply wanted to know where his body was so they could give him one final send-off and funeral. Fast forward to 9 years later. On November 10th, 2015, when Brian Hausman was using a cherry picker to decorate a Christmas tree outside of Cook Funeral Home in Byron Center, Michigan. As he was decorating and looking over the landscape, something in the lake off 84th Street Southwest caught his eye. It looked like a car submerged in the water. This stuck in the back of Brian's mind, and when he got home, he used satellite images from Google Maps to confirm that there was indeed a car in the lake. Knowing about the mysterious disappearance of David years earlier, he called this into police, who were able to recover the car and confirm that it was David's. After 9 long years, his family had answers as to what had finally happened to their loved one.
Rodney Alcala is better known as the notorious dating game serial killer, a moniker that he received after his crimes came to light. It was discovered that he had appeared on the dating game show in September of 1978. Luckily, the woman who chose him above the other male contestants decided not to go on a date with him, since he struck her as creepy and strange, despite the fact that he described himself as a successful photographer. The pair won a trip to the Magic Mountain theme park, as well as tennis lessons that they would receive together. But the woman told Alcala that she didn't want to go on the date, and that she didn't want to see him again since he was acting so strangely. A fellow contestant also later stated he found Alcala's behavior behind the scenes of the show to be bizarre. He recounted that while they were in the green room, he suddenly burst and declared that he always got his girl, a statement that, in retrospect, sends shivers down one's spine. But what no one knew at the time was that Alcala had been an active serial killer for close to a year. On the 9th of November, 1977, he ended the life of Jill Barcone in Oneida, New York. Her murder was at first attributed to the Hillside Strangler, but it was later determined that Alcala was responsible. A month later, he attacked and ended the life of 27-year-old Georgia Wickstead in Malibu. She was reported missing after missing a shift at her hospital where she was working as a nurse, and when the police conducted a welfare check, she was found deceased in her apartment. Alcala's handprint was also discovered and kept as evidence. He then ended the life of 32-year-old Charlotte Lamb in El Segundo in June that next year, and Alcala's DNA was collected at the crime scene. Following this, he appeared on the dating game before then attacking a hitchhiker named Monique Hoyt, who somehow managed to escape the horrific ordeal. She contacted the police and Alcala was arrested, but his mother posted his bail. His crime spree then continued as he ended the lives of 21-year-old Jill Parento in June of 1979 and Robin Samso just over a month later. A composite sketch of the attacker was created, and when Alcala's parole officer recognized him, he was taken into custody once more. This time, he was not offered bail.
and in August of 1986 he received the death penalty after a second trial. In March of 2010, over 1,000 photos were found in Alcala's locker depicting some of his victims and other unknown women. 120 of these photos were made public, and 21 women came forward to report that they were the ones in the photos. Many families contacted the police to state that some of the women depicted had gone missing around the time that the photos were taken, and they were assumed to be additional victims. But there is one photo that still baffles investigators. It shows Alcala in the company of a woman who's sitting on his lap, clearly none the wiser of his heinous crimes. It's not known where this photo was taken, but it's dated to a time before he appeared on the game show, and the police have asked that anyone who recognizes her come forward so that she can either be included or excluded as one of his victims. Alcala was never executed since he passed away from a heart attack while being treated at Kings County Hospital in July of 2021.
In 2012, friends of a man named Guy Winters convinced him to take a trip to the O'Hare Mansion, located in Greencastle, Indiana. They'd recently visited the abandoned building and had experienced a series of unexplained phenomena. Guy eventually agreed, and the group traveled to the site, which was built by the O'Hare family in the 1800s as a family home that stood for many generations. Once again, the group experienced strange events, such as apparitions that seemed to be walking down one of the hallways. They also managed to capture a strange mist with their video camera, and Guy decided to take a few extra photos on the upper floors on his own, as his friends didn't feel comfortable in that part of the building. As he snapped several photos, he started to feel ill and felt as if his head was pulsing. But he didn't see anything out of the ordinary, and the group eventually headed home. However, when Guy had his images developed, he realized that he'd taken a truly creepy and scary photo of an apparition that he couldn't see while walking through the mansion. In 3 of the strange photos that were taken of the second-floor bedroom windows, he had inadvertently captured the image of what is known as the Pink Lady. Each of the photos shows the apparition in a different position, as if it was moving around while Guy was snapping the pictures. When he checked the negatives, he saw that the ghostly figure was present there as well, and there's been no evidence found that the scary photos had been manipulated. A local TV station ran a story on the creepy photos, and a woman named Mary came forward and stated that she was a descendant of the O'Hares. She showed him pictures of her mother Irene, after realizing that the figure closely resembled her. It was revealed that the window where the apparition is seen in the photo was, in fact, Irene's bedroom window, and Mary believes it was her mother who still walked the building's halls.
Photography has a long and complicated history that dates all the way back to 1826 or 1827, since that's the first time that a photo was ever taken. The person responsible was Joseph Niepce, who decided to experiment with the view outside his house in Burgundy, France. While the resulting image may not make much sense to the modern eye, showing blurred shapes and only vaguely resembles some stonework, it paved the way towards what we now know as photography. That very photo is still on display at the Ransom Center at the University of Texas, and its importance cannot be overstated. Even after this photo was taken, it took a further 200 years for the art form to take off. It was only in 1838 when Louis Daguerre set up his camera to take a photo of the Boulevard du Temple in Paris that the first ever photo of a human was taken. He used a method known as daguerreotype, which required at least 7 minutes of exposure for the image to develop. Thus, anything that was moving around, such as horse-drawn carriages, people walking on the sidewalk, or birds flying by, would not have been captured in the image. But these were not Daguerre's intended subjects. He merely wanted to preserve an image of that area around him, and in the process, accidentally captured the first ever photo of a person. The image of the area is surprisingly clear since it was exposed for 10 minutes, and it shows buildings in the foreground, as well as the street leading between them. Several trees can be seen lining the street on both sides, but as one looks into the distance, the details become less clear. But in the bottom left corner of the photo, 2 distinct figures can be seen on the street corner. A man had stopped to have his shoes shined by a young boy. and since this took some time to complete, he and the boy were included in the long exposure without their knowledge. It's now considered to be the first ever example of portraiture, though most people who've had their portraits taken do so willingly. The rest of the street, sidewalk, and the surrounding area seems completely empty, but many people would have been bustling around at the time. The fact that they were moving means that they simply didn't show up in the photo, and had it been taken with a modern camera, the scene would be much more lively and exciting. Nevertheless, the importance of this photo is significant, since it was, for quite some time, believed that the first photo of a human was taken in the 1840s. But when Daguerre's image was discovered, the history of photography was rewritten.
A woman simply known for 40 years as the Orange Socks Jane Doe was identified when a family member came forward after an updated composite sketch was made. On October 31st, 1979, the body of a young woman was found in a drainage ditch in Georgetown, Texas. She was naked apart from wearing a pair of orange socks, leading to the name Orange Socks Jane Doe. Her cause of death was listed as strangulation, and it appeared that she'd been thrown from an overpass, leading to her final resting place. She had extensive bruising and injuries to her body, and bloodstains were found at the crime scene. However, police had a hard time distinguishing between injuries sustained from the attack and those from being thrown from the overpass. Police released the following details about Orange Socks. They knew that she was between 18 and 30 years old, had reddish-brown hair and hazel eyes. She had unique earlobes along with unusually long toes and suffered from gonorrhea. Lots of other evidence was found at the scene, such as a homemade sanitary towel and matchbooks from a hotel in Henrietta, Oklahoma, leading investigators to speculate that she was a hitchhiker. Henry Lee Lucas confessed to Orange Socks' case, but told police that he didn't know her name, only that she'd gone by Joannie or Joni or even Judy. It was later concluded that although Lucas confessed, he wasn't in Texas at the time and therefore could not be responsible. It wouldn't be until 2019 that Orange Socks would finally get her name back. In late 2019, new reconstruction photographs were made and circulated around the US with the help of the DNA Doe Project, who dedicate their services to bringing the unknown back home. These new images caught the eye of a woman who claimed the Orange Socks Jane Doe looked a lot like her sister, Deborah Jackson. Her sister revealed that she last saw Deborah in 1977 when she left their home in Abilene, Texas to work in Amarillo and Azle, Texas. From there, her family didn't hear much from her and assumed that Deborah was happy and getting on with her life and would be in contact when she was ready. Thus, why a missing persons report was never filed for the 23-year-old. Taking this lead very seriously in an otherwise stone-cold case, police took DNA samples from the woman claiming to be Orange Socks' sister, and it was a match. DNA confirmed that the Orange Socks Jane Doe who had died in 1979 was Deborah Jackson. Although it took 40 years, Deborah and her family finally had closure.
A discovery that was made in Kenya's desert badlands in 2001 may rewrite the way that we think about how we as humans develop the ability to fashion and use tools that were created out of nothing more than rock. Before this discovery was made, experts used to believe that tool making started about 2.8 million years ago. But in 2011, an archaeologist from Stony Brook University was conducting research at Lake Turkana in the Rift Valley of Kenya when she noticed something truly unusual. Scattered on the ground near the water was what she at first believed to be rudimentary stone artifacts, and she gathered a few up for further study. Other artifacts had been found in the area years earlier when excavations were carried out, and hence she believed she'd stumbled across a trove of more of these items. But when she studied the items found on the surface, she realized that several fit neatly into items that had been uncovered from the soil, and that they were connected. The sediment in which the tools were found was dated to 3.3 million years ago, using paleomagnetic dating. This is significant since the items have now been identified as tools that were used around that time, and they predate the oldest known tools that were discovered in Gona, Ethiopia, by at least a few 100,000 years. After this discovery was made, it became clear that we have more to learn about our history of tool creation. It's believed that they were carved by the Kenyanthropus platypus human relative that was discovered in Kenya in 1998.
On the 25th of August, 1951, Texas Technical College scientist Dr. W. Robertson, Dr. A.G. Oberg, Dr. George, and Dr. W.L. Ducker were gathered in Robertson's back garden drinking tea when they witnessed something that they couldn't explain. At around 9:20 p.m., they witnessed a V-shaped formation of lights with a blue-green hue flying in the sky above them. They were perplexed by what the lights could be, and about an hour later, they got a second chance to observe them when they returned. This time, the formation was more random as opposed to the V-shape, but they were still unable to identify what the lights were. They weren't the only ones who were baffled by the strange lights, though. Hundreds of people in the area reported seeing them, one of which was a Texas Tech freshman called Carl Hart. 5 days after the initial sighting, Carl was in the backyard of his parents' house when the lights returned, again in a V-shape. He ran into the house and fetched his camera, adjusted the exposure, and after waiting for a short while, managed to take a creepy, unexplained photo of the strange flying lights. He processed the photos and traveled to the Lubbock Avalanche Journal newspaper, whose staff were skeptical at first, but ultimately decided to publish them. A few months later, they were published in Life magazine, and they would eventually become known as the Lubbock Lights. The professors and Hart were all interviewed by government employees about the incident. This was done as part of Project Grudge, which later became known as Project Blue Book. Hart's photos were eventually found to be genuine, and investigators inquired from military installments in the area if they'd been missiles or aircraft, but officials stated that they definitely weren't. Investigators eventually decided that the lights were merely plover-like birds that had reflected street lights in the area, but biologists would later refute this, saying that the lights were too big to be plovers, and that the birds were not usually seen in that area at that time of year. Many witnesses believed that they'd seen extraterrestrial aircraft. Others believed the theory that it was merely reflected light from the street lights, while others are at a loss for any type of explanation for what they saw. The incident drew a lot of attention, and the professors as well as other witnesses would eventually grow tired of discussing the incident and stopped giving interviews altogether. 40 years after the creepy photos were taken, Carl Hart stated that he had no explanation for what he saw that night, but he was certain that he would never forget it. One of Project Blue Book's investigators, United States Air Force officer Edward Rappelt, stated that the lights were eventually identified as a naturally occurring phenomenon. He couldn't, however, divulge what the phenomenon was or who the scientist who discovered it was, as he'd been promised anonymity, and if this information was released, his identity would be revealed.
The case of the tragic passing of 24-year-old Matrice Richardson has left a lot of people angered over the belief that she should have been taken better care of by the police in Malibu in 2009. The case started on the 17th of September that year when she had dinner at a Malibu restaurant called Jeffrey's, ordering $89 worth of food and drinks while she was there. But when she failed to pay her bill, the police were called and she was arrested. But her failure to pay wasn't the main reason for her being taken into custody. Staff and customers at the restaurant reported that she'd been acting very strangely and erratically, and when officers arrived, they witnessed the same behavior. The details have not been shared by the authorities, but it was reported that she tried to engage several people, including the valet, in conversation about bizarre subjects, and she was transported to the Lost Hills Sheriff's Station after being subjected to and passing a field sobriety test, which means she wasn't intoxicated. Once there, investigators had the option to send Matrice for a psychiatric evaluation so that it could be determined whether she should be released or not, but this was never done. The second option was to hold her at the station overnight so that she could be properly observed, but instead they chose the less arduous path. Despite the fact that she'd been seen clutching the screen of the holding pen and rocking back and forth for some time, Matrice was released from the station at around midnight that same night. She'd never been in that area before, and hence was completely unfamiliar with her surroundings, and she had no food, water, or extra clothing with her. Even more bizarre is the fact that she was told to leave without anyone close to her being notified, despite the police knowing she didn't have a cell phone with her. She had no way of contacting anyone. She wasn't offered a ride home and was left to her own devices. When questioned about this, the officers involved stated they didn't see any signs that Matrice was going through a mental health episode. But this was contradicted by every single person that she interacted with at the restaurant that night. A surveillance photo from the station shows Matrice being released by a deputy, after which she disappeared into the hills of Malibu. For the next 10 months, no one saw or heard from her, and there were fears she may have become stranded somewhere, with no way of making her way home. The truth is that she walked about 7 miles into the wilderness, and there her remains were found. The investigation only got stranger, as her remains were removed before a coroner could investigate the scene to determine the reason for her passing, the time at which it occurred, and whether she had indeed lost her life in that spot. What followed was branded as a cover-up by many people. Staff at the station were found to be untruthful about what happened that night. Protocols had been violated, evidence was withheld, and soon allegations of neglect were made. Then Captain Tom Martin claimed that there was no footage of Matrice while she was being held at the station, but the tape containing the footage was later found in his own desk drawer. Furthermore, when her mother approached the station to file a missing person report, she was told to wait before doing so, but she was never told why. It's a truly troubling case that has changed the lives of Matrice's family forever, and they're hoping to soon receive the answers they've been looking for.
Much like the case of David Lee Niles, the case of William Moult has also been solved by locating his car on Google Maps. On November 7, 1997, 40-year-old William Moult disappeared from Palm Beach, Florida after he didn't return from a night out. According to his girlfriend, he called her at around 9:30 p.m. from a nightclub in Palm Beach, telling her he wouldn't be out much longer and would be home within the next few hours. He finished up his drinks and got into his car to drive home, but never arrived. Heartbroken, his girlfriend called the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office to report him missing. There were no signs of William, and it seemed that he had simply disappeared off the face of the earth. With no signs of foul play either, police had very little to work with. Time passed, and the case of William Moult grew colder and colder, but for his family and friends, there wasn't a day that went by that they didn't think about him. William's case would lay dormant for 22 years until a chance discovery finally provided his family with the answers they'd so desperately been searching for. It was in August of 2019 that an estate surveyor was using Google Maps to look at the Grand Isle area of Wellington and came across what he believed to be a car and a pond in the Moon Bay Circle area. He spoke to locals in the area who told him about William's case and offered up assistance, using his drone to further survey the area. When the drone was flown out to the pond, it was confirmed that there was a submerged car in there, and police were called to the scene. Police were able to perform a recovery operation and pulled the car from the water. A week later, the remains inside were identified as William Moult. Palm Beach County investigators believed that William was intoxicated and lost control of his car, plunging him into the lake. Therese Barbera, a spokesperson for the sheriff's office, told BBC News, "You can't determine what happened that many years ago. All we know is that he went missing off the face of the earth and now he's been discovered." William's family have since been informed and asked for privacy in their time of mourning. It's since transpired that William's car was visible on Google Maps since 2007, but no one made the connection until 2019.
In 1910, Waverly Hills Sanatorium opened its doors, serving as a hospital for tuberculosis patients during an outbreak of the disease in Jefferson County in Kentucky, known as the White Plague. When an antibiotic was created to treat the condition, the hospital was closed and reopened again in 1962 as a nursing home. Today, it's owned by private investigators, and the building is frequented by curious visitors due to rumors that it's haunted. On the 10th of September 2006, Tom Halstead was one such visitor who stayed overnight. Tom is part of the Missouri Paranormal Research Team that was investigating the building, and around 7 a.m., he was walking on the 4th floor of the sanitarium when he took a truly scary and creepy photo in one of the corridors. In the photo, the sanitarium's dilapidated walls can be seen stretching off into the gloomy distance. But on closer inspection, it shows something unexpected. On the right-hand side of the camera, a woman can be seen exiting one of the rooms, seemingly looking directly at the camera.
She has dark hair and is wearing a light-colored dress with what looks like a white collar. But the bottom of her dress and her feet seem to be transparent, as if she's only partially there. It's believed that the spirit is of a nurse called Mary Lee, who worked at the hospital and who ended her life when she learned that she'd contracted tuberculosis. Others theorized that she was actually the daughter of a doctor who worked in the building, and that she was in the habit of visiting with the patients that were being treated there. It's also been rumored that she was merely a patient who received treatment at the sanatorium, and that she eventually passed away in the building, still walking its halls today as a ghostly apparition.
The Pisco Holes, also known as the Band of Holes and Serpent Mountain, are located on the Pisco Valley of the Nazca Plateau in Peru. And these strange formations have left researchers baffled ever since they were first reported on in the 1930s. These reports were made by an aviator called Robert Shippey, who flew over the area at one point, and after taking a few aerial photos of the strange holes, decided to have them published in the National Geographic magazine. Each of these holes measures about 3 feet across, and most are between 20 and 40 inches deep. Some were created by digging into mounds of soil, while others were built from the ground up using stones and rocks found in the area. Flying above the area provides the observer with a truly remarkable sight. The band of holes stretches over a large area, and from the air looks like a crude path or dry riverbed that's been carved into the ground. While they are a true bafflement, not many people have traveled to the area to study them. But in 1953, an American explorer called Victor Wolfgang von Hagen decided to investigate, and he was the first person to suggest a hypothesis as to what they may be. He felt that they were used as a burial site, but that the remains that were buried there had been removed for reasons unknown. He also suggested that there were about 5,000 of these graves scattered around the area. But not everyone was convinced, since there was very little evidence to support this theory. No human remains were found at the site, and it seemed illogical that these graves would be disturbed, unless it was done with nefarious intent. In 1984, John Hislop, an archaeologist, stated in a book that he had authored that the holes may have been used for storage a very long time ago. He'd seen a similar site on the south coast of Peru years earlier, and in that case, it was determined that people used them to store guano, which is bat droppings, which could be used as fertilizer to help grow crops. It was confirmed in 2015 by a team of University of California researchers that the area does indeed contain as many as 6,000 of these holes, or depressions, and they date back to around the 15th century. This theory was suggested after an Incan road and pottery were found nearby, and they supported the theory that the holes were used as storage. But there's another theory that they were used in commerce. When farmers brought grain or other items to the king as tribute, the holes may have been used to measure how much of that item was brought before they appeared before the king. If the produce didn't fill the hole entirely, that tribute may have been seen as insufficient.
David Soanes of Derbyshire, England, was gutted to find out that his $12,000 caravan had been stolen from his front yard. The family were planning to take the caravan out for a family holiday and quickly reported the incident to police. While not as serious as other crimes mentioned in this video, theft of property is still a crime that needs to be taken seriously and resolved in a timely manner. PC Adrian Mason and Derbyshire police estimate that the caravan was stolen between 9:30 a.m. and 2 p.m. when all members of the Soanes family were out of the house. The case soon fizzled out until 9 months later when one of the Soanes' children was looking through Google Maps. Their son, 11-year-old Ruben, was searching up his own home on Google Maps when he discovered a lead. It just so happened that the Google Maps car was passing through their estate that day and captured the burglar in the act. The image taken from that day reveals a middle-aged balding man on the front drive of the Soanes' home. The man is standing next to his 4x4 and appears to be in the process of hooking up the caravan to steal it. PC Mason told the Daily Mail, quote, "It's amazing that we have such a clear image of the man. I've made extensive inquiries since the image was discovered, but because the plates on the 4x4 are blanked out, we've been unable to trace the man through his car. At first, Google refused to release the man's registration number due to privacy concerns. However, after Derbyshire police threatened Google with a court order, they gave up the information." They were able to question and arrest the 49-year-old man in connection with the burglary. When asked about the incident, David Soanes told newspapers, "We've decided to forget about caravanning now and have bought a tent instead." In 2013, 43-year-old business manager Corinne Federer made a trip to the Muterslot Castle, and apologies if that's a bad pronunciation, just outside of Amsterdam, and while there, she decided to take a series of photos with her camera's high dynamic range function, also known as HDR, and she was surprised to find that she'd captured a truly creepy photo. The HDR feature on a camera works by taking a series of 3 or more photos at the same time. These images are then overlaid on each other, giving the photographer a much clearer image due to the full spectrum of light being captured. On that particular day, Corinne took dozens of photos, and it wasn't until she took a closer look at them later that she noticed something strange. The creepy photo shows a silhouette of the castle with a few clouds in the background, but on the top left side of the photo, a strange object can be seen. It has an oblong shape with what seems to be navigational fins towards the back. Corinne dismissed the idea that this may be a missile, as it would have had more fins facing the same direction. But the object in the photo seems to only have 2 fins in an S shape. She also states that they never noticed the object while taking the photos, and strangely also didn't hear anything as the area was completely quiet. The image was inspected by a former FBI special agent, Ben Hansen, and he believes the image is 100% real, stating that there's no indication of post-editing software being used, and the object seems to be internally consistent with the rest of the image. He did, however, state that he isn't certain that it shows a craft of any kind, and that there is a chance that it may have been the result of an insect flying past at just the right moment. Others have speculated that it may be the result of a weather balloon or a passing airplane. But Corinne is insistent that the creepy photo may show an extraterrestrial craft, possibly one that was passing by in outer space. She states that it isn't unreasonable to believe that there are other habitable planets in space with a civilization that has started space exploration. She added that it's possible that extraterrestrials that are far more advanced than the human race have stopped by our planet to see what's going on. On June 13, 1993, people taking a walk around a reservoir in New York made a heartbreaking discovery. Submerged in the water was the body of a man wearing a backpack filled with 38 pounds of rocks. Among the crime scene, police found a black and white photograph from either the 50s or 60s of an elderly gentleman posing with a toddler. With the photograph being their only clue, police attempted to track down the toddler in the photograph as they believed this was their victim. However, the case soon turned cold. No one came forward to say that they recognized the toddler or the man. The man found in the reservoir that day didn't match any missing persons reports, and his fingerprints didn't appear on any databases. It wasn't until years later that police decided to reopen the cold case as part of a cold case task force. Police circulated the photo throughout the local media, and it caught the attention of a retired teacher, Terry Yakubish. Terry told police that she recognized the building that the pair were standing in front of. It was an old church auditorium. She told them that she recognized the building to be in Long Island, not Massachusetts as previously speculated. Terry also told local newspapers, "The moment I saw that picture, I knew exactly where it was." Armed with this information, police traveled to the small village of Brookhaven, and lo and behold, the building from the photograph was still standing. Through the use of land ownership records and talking to residents, police were able to find that the Bookless family had lived there until their house had burned down. The Westchester County's medical examiner then used dental records to confirm that the 1993 Jane Doe was in fact Andrew Bookless. Police cannot confirm whether Andrew's death was a suicide or an accident. The main speculation by the medical examiner is that Andrew fell through the ice on the reservoir months before he was found. Either way, Andrew's family has welcomed the resolution to the case and are happy that Andrew is finally home.
This photo may seem completely innocent and even endearing, as it seems to depict a son and his elderly mother about to embark on a short boat trip in Melbourne, Australia. But the truth is far more bizarre than that.
The two people who can be seen in the image are 56-year-old Adrian Menevo and his mother, 83-year-old Felicity Loveday. At this very moment, they're about to leave the shore at Oliver's Hill boat ramp in Frankston, and the date that the photo was taken was on the 11th of December 2019. This was also not meant to be a short trip, as the pair had decided to travel on the boat for 3 days. Before they set off, Adrian's sister Christina decided to take a snapshot of the moment, unaware that she would never see either of them again. When they failed to return 3 days later as expected, Christina started to worry, and she contacted the police to report her mother and brother as missing. What this image doesn't reveal is that Felicity had been suffering from dementia for some time, and that Adrian had been taking care of her for about 7 years. In an effort to improve her condition, Felicity had started practicing meditation and other spiritual practices, but Adrian didn't approve of this, as he believed it filled her with what he called bad magic. He felt that he needed to find a way to remove this bad magic, since his mother was too frail to do so on her own, and the boat trip was supposed to achieve this, since he believed the salt water would cleanse her spirit. Adrian had bought the boat in Christina's name and took out insurance before they set out on the trip, but this behavior in the days before they set sail caused investigators some concerns. He sent all of his online passwords, banking details, and a will to Christina, and instructed that his entire estate would be left to her. It was also later discovered that he had searched the words sea burial on the internet just days before the trip was scheduled to take place. Christina filed a missing person report on the 14th of December. The case struck investigators as strange, since they felt Felicity was too frail to last on a fishing vessel for 3 days. Furthermore, conditions on the water over those 3 days were not conducive to such a small boat being out for an extended period, but Adrian never turned back. A search was conducted, and on the 15th of December, the boat was found adrift in the bay. It was empty, and the engine had been turned off, but it held no clue as to where Adrian and Felicity had gone. Soon after, 2 life jackets matching the ones worn by the pair were found in the water, and it's now believed that both the mother and son perished in the water sometime during the trip. Cal Ripken Jr. is considered by many people to have been the greatest shortstop in all of baseball history. He holds the record for the most consecutive games played in the major leagues, and has been inducted into the MLB Hall of Fame. But not everyone knows that in 2012, his mother Violet, better known as V, lived through a terrifying ordeal that resulted in a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. It all started on the evening of the 24th of May that year, when at around 8 p.m., a married couple in White Marsh, Maryland, became suspicious when they saw a silver car parked near the intersection of Ebenezer Road and the Pulaski Highway. What struck them as strange was that the man standing outside the car was wearing gloves. It was the middle of summer, and he certainly would not have needed to keep his hands warm. When they spotted an elderly woman sitting in the car with a strange type of mask on, they decided to investigate, since the car was parked on their property. As they approached the car, their suspicions only grew when they noticed that a white piece of material was covering up the back window on the driver's side. As they neared the man in question, they both started to feel uneasy, and when they asked him who the woman in the car was, he replied that it was his mother, who was suffering from Alzheimer's. He then jumped in the car and drove away at a high rate of speed, but the couple was able to copy the car's license plate number, and they contacted the police to report that they believed they'd encountered a kidnapping in progress. When the license plate number was checked, it was discovered that the car belonged to 74-year-old V, and when the police went to her house to check on her, they became concerned when it was apparent she wasn't there. She'd clearly been abducted, and her neighbors reported seeing a suspicious pickup truck driving up and down the street on several occasions over the course of the previous few days. The following morning, Violet was found still in her car by a neighbor who was returning home. Her abductor had left her in the vehicle, and she was spotted because she was waving a sweatshirt out of the window while honking the horn. After she was brought back home, she explained that on the morning of the abduction, she entered her garage to find a strange man standing there. He was wearing a ski mask and gloves and threatened to harm her. She was told to get into the car, after which he bound her hands and ankles and blindfolded her. He then taped her glasses so that she couldn't see and placed her in the back seat. For the rest of the day, the man merely drove around with this hostage, and at one point, he covered one of the windows so that she wouldn't be seen. He stopped for gas and food several times and assured V he wasn't planning on hurting her. He even shared his food with her, and she soon realized that he had no idea that she was the mother of a famous baseball player. He never asked for money, never harmed her, and despite the fact that the man's photo was gathered from CCTV footage, he was never identified, and the motive for the kidnapping remains a mystery. In February of 2001, Michael Gargiulo was living in Glenview, Illinois, and one night he walked to the house of his next-door neighbor, 22-year-old fashion student Ashley Alarin. He'd helped her with a few odd jobs around her house in the past, but on this night, he had nefarious intentions. As soon as he entered the house, he attacked her and ended her life with a sharpened blade. She was discovered by one of her roommates the next day, and the police started an investigation. Little did they know that Ashley wasn't the first life that he had taken. When he was just 17 years old, Gargiulo attacked his then neighbor, 18-year-old Trisha Picasio, on her back doorstep. He'd also used a blade in that attack and ended her life, but as soon as he fell under suspicion, he relocated to Los Angeles. But back in California, he then met Ashley and ended her life, and 4 years later, on the 1st of December 2005, he attacked yet another neighbor, 32-year-old Maria Bruno, in El Monte, California, once again using a blade to carry out the crime. On the 28th of April 2008, he attacked his 26-year-old neighbor, Michelle Murphy, in Santa Monica, but she fought back bravely, and when Gargiulo injured himself during the struggle, he fled. But he left biological material at the scene, and after it was analyzed, he was finally arrested. He was charged with several counts of first-degree murder, and he hinted that he'd ended the lives of as many women as 10. Famously, one of the witnesses called to the stand during the trial was famous actor Ashton Kutcher. He explained that on the night that Ashley was attacked, they were supposed to go out on a date. But when he arrived at her house late, he got no answer at her door. When he looked through a window, he noticed what he believed to be red wine stains on the floor, and he left, assuming that his tardiness had angered her and that she was no longer interested in going out. Gargiulo was found guilty of the charges against him, and on the 16th of July, 2021, he was handed the death penalty. But not all the mysteries in this case have been solved. A photo of Gargiulo and an unknown woman continues to baffle investigators, since they have no idea who she is, and they believe she may be another of his victims. In this photo, and several others that have been made available to the public, Gargiulo and the woman are seen hugging and kissing, suggesting they were in a romantic relationship at some point. It's believed that it was taken in 2001 or 2002, around the same time that he attacked Ashley. She's believed to be in her early 20s, and in the photo, she seems happy to be in his company, and likely had no knowledge of the heinous crimes he'd committed. Some mysteries, especially those involving aspects of the paranormal, are seemingly impossible to solve. In some cases, people are left at their wits' end when items in their houses, such as furniture and crockery, start to move around by themselves, or they hear disembodied voices and footsteps that they're unable to locate or explain. In others, people see what they can only explain as apparitions that are believed to be haunting a house, church, or even a ship, as was the case with a photo taken aboard such a vessel in 2014 by an unsuspecting dock foreman. In September of that year, a decommissioned military frigate was brought into a port at a location that's not been disclosed by the media. The plan was for the vessel to be broken down, after which the metal would be salvaged and used as scrap. By the time this mystery started to unfold, the ship had been docked for about 2 weeks, but before it could be broken down, there was a lot of work that still needed to be completed. Equipment had to be removed from many rooms of the ship, along with sensitive documents and other items that were then returned to the US Navy. This took some time to complete, but once it was done, dock workers were free to go onto the ship, and the first to do so was a dock worker who'd been tasked with taking photos of every room aboard the ship. This was requested by his foreman, who wanted to make sure that all of the necessary items had been removed before work could begin on dismantling the vessel. He asked the worker, a man named John, to email the photos to him as soon as he was done, and John obliged. He meticulously walked through each room, taking photos while also double-checking that the preemptive work had been carried out correctly. He ended up taking almost 200 photos, which he then sent to his foreman as requested. He believed that everything would be found in order, and that he would soon receive the go-ahead to start breaking the ship down. But then he received a phone call that left him and his fellow workers baffled. The foreman, sounding perplexed, asked who the axe-wielding man aboard the ship was, and John, having no idea who he was referring to, simply stated he hadn't seen anyone aboard while taking the photos. The foreman then emailed him the photo in question, pointing out that in one of the rooms, a man could be seen peering out from behind a corner with what appeared to be an axe in his hand. John had never seen the man because this photo was taken in the bowels of the ship. Every time he took a photo, he would turn his flashlight on, leaving him in complete darkness, and once he was done with that room, he would move on to the next. After studying the photo closely, John explained that the man in question was certainly not any of the dock workers that he knew, and the police were informed. The ship was searched thoroughly, but to no avail, which was strange since there was only one way to get off the ship, a gangway that was monitored by CCTV cameras. When the footage of that day was reviewed, it showed no sign of the mysterious figure, leading many people to believe that it was in fact a ghost or some otherworldly apparition.
Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.